She had you figured out. Or so she thought. She had catalogued your investment, your consistency, your willingness to show up. And somewhere in that cataloging she made the specific, costly mistake that people always make about the man who gives generously without demanding recognition. She decided the giving came from need, that the consistency came from desperation, that the reason you were always there was because you could not imagine being anywhere else. She thought you needed her, and for a while, if you are honest, maybe some part of you did. But something changed, and the man she thought she had figured out became something she had no category for. Like and subscribe to Stoic Blessing. We show up every day for the man doing the hard work. Let's get into it. The first thing to understand is why the need assumption gets formed, because understanding it clearly is what prevents you from being angry about it and allows you to use it as information instead. The need assumption is almost never malicious. It is almost always the product of a very human pattern of inference that goes like this: consistent presence plus consistent investment plus consistent accommodation equals someone who cannot afford to be anywhere else. The man who shows up reliably, who absorbs the imbalance without complaint, who continues to invest at a high level regardless of what is returned. That man, viewed from the outside without access to his interior life, looks like someone who is there because he needs to be, not because he chooses to be, because the alternative is unthinkable to him. And that interpretation, however wrong, makes a kind of surface-level sense when the only data available is the pattern of behavior rather than the internal state behind it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the gap between how things appear and what they actually are, about the specific discipline required to see past the surface presentation of a situation to the actual reality underneath. She was not seeing past the surface. She was reading the behavior and inferring the desperation that she assumed must be driving it. What she could not see, what the surface did not show her, was the internal reality behind the consistency, the genuine values that produced the showing up, the real care that generated the investment, the specific choice made daily and freely to be present in a connection that genuinely mattered. The consistency was not the product of inability to leave. It was the product of a man who had decided that what was here was worth being present for. She could not see that distinction, and mistaking genuine investment for desperate need is one of the most common and most costly errors in human relationships. Comment below, I showed up by choice, if your consistency was never desperation. It was a decision she mistook for dependency. Here is what happened when the need assumption was tested, when the circumstances changed in a way that required the assumption to prove itself accurate or reveal itself as the error it actually was. The testing of the need assumption almost always happens the same way. The person who held it does something, consciously or unconsciously, that is only reasonable if the assumption is correct. They pull back. They become inconsistent. They test the limits of the availability they assumed was unconditional. They act in some way as though the man who was always there will continue to be always there regardless of what they do. And in doing so, they create the specific conditions under which the assumption either proves itself or fails. If the man was there from need, the testing produces increased anxiety and increased effort to restore the connection. If the man was there from genuine choice, the testing produces something entirely different, the withdrawal of the choice. Epictetus taught about the difference between what is endured and what is chosen, between the man who stays because he cannot leave and the man who stays because he has decided to. The difference is invisible in the presence of both. It becomes visible the moment the conditions change. When the conditions changed, when the assumption was acted on in a way that made continuing to choose the connection no longer consistent with the values that had been driving the choice. The man who was there from genuine choice made a different decision, not from anger, not from strategy, from the simple, honest, self-respecting recognition that his choice was no longer being met with the conditions that had made the choice reasonable. And that decision, quiet, undramatic, entirely about his own values rather than her behavior, is the moment the need assumption collapsed under the weight of its own inaccuracy. Comment below. I left by choice too if walking away was never weakness. It was the same freedom that brought you there in the first place. Now here is the Stoic concept that sits at the center of everything this video is about. The concept that transforms a man from someone who appears to need and into someone who is genuinely untouchable. The concept is autokeia, self-sufficiency. Not the cold, performative, deliberately unavailable self-sufficiency of a man who has decided that needing nothing is a competitive advantage. The genuine, warm, functional completeness of a person whose inner life is rich enough, whose sense of worth is grounded enough, whose daily relationship with his own values is solid enough that his engagement with the world, including his engagement with the people he loves and the connections he invests in, comes from genuine fullness rather than from the need to fill something that is empty. That man is not needy. He is not cold. He is genuinely full. And the difference between a man who gives from fullness and a man who gives from emptiness is felt immediately by every person who encounters either of them, even if they cannot name what they are feeling. Seneca wrote about this distinction with the kind of precision that only comes from having felt both states personally. He wrote about the specific quality of the man who has done the inner work, who has built the genuine, nourishing, self-sustaining inner life that does not depend on external conditions to remain intact, and about how that quality changes every interaction he has. He does not reach, he extends. He does not seek, he offers. He does not pursue validation. He radiates the specific, quiet confidence of someone who already has what he needs and is choosing to share it, rather than desperately trying to acquire it. That quality, the quality of genuine fullness rather than disguised emptiness, is what becoming untouchable actually means. Not invulnerable to feeling, not closed to connection, genuinely functionally complete without requiring anyone else's presence to remain so. Comment below, I give from fullness, if you finally built the inner life that makes your love a choice and not a need. Let's talk about what the transformation from apparently needy to genuinely untouchable actually requires, because it is almost never what people think it requires, and the misconception is what causes most men to attempt a performance rather than a genuine change. Most men, when they decide they want to stop appearing needy, focus on their behavior. They work on not texting first, on responding with measured delay, on appearing less available and less invested, on projecting the external signals of someone who needs nothing. This is the performance of untouchability, and it is distinguishable from the reality in ways that matter enormously. Because performance requires maintenance, it requires the constant management of a presentation that does not reflect an internal reality. And the specific cost of that management, the exhaustion of performing an internal state you do not actually have, is visible over time to anyone paying close attention. The performance of not needing eventually reveals the need that is being performed around. The genuine transformation is different. It is not behavioral. It is architectural. It is the specific daily cumulative work of building an inner life that is rich enough to generate genuine self-sufficiency rather than requiring the performance of it. This means the work, the actual, specific, demanding, unsexy work. The development of genuine purpose, the cultivation of skills that produce the specific, grounding satisfaction of your own competence, the building of physical discipline that reminds your body daily that you are someone who keeps promises to yourself, the practice of genuine solitude not loneliness, but the nourishing, examined, self-revealing solitude of a man who is comfortable in his own company and genuinely interested in his own thinking. The development of friendships that are real rather than strategic. The daily examination of your values and the daily practice of aligning your choices with them. Each of these things, built consistently over time, produces something that the performance of independence can never produce. The actual inner life that makes genuine self-sufficiency not just possible, but natural. Comment below, "I'm building, not performing," if you've stopped faking the inner work and started doing it. Here is what became untouchable. And being specific about this is important, because untouchable is a word that gets misused in ways that make it sound like emotional armor rather than what it actually is. What became untouchable was not your feelings. You still feel. You feel deeply, perhaps more deeply than before, because the genuine inner work produces genuine emotional capacity rather than reducing it. What became untouchable was your sense of worth, your relationship with your own value, the specific, internally generated, daily verified knowledge of who you are and what you bring, built through the practice of keeping promises to yourself, through the experience of doing hard things and discovering your own capacity, through the honest examination of your values and the genuine alignment of your choices with them. That knowledge, not received from her, not dependent on her assessment, not requiring her validation to remain intact, is what no withdrawal of approval, no act of indifference, no replaceable assumption, no loss of any kind can permanently touch. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel, the inviolable sanctuary of your own mind and your own judgment that no external force can enter without permission. He built it daily, not in the comfortable moments, but in the hard ones, not when things were going well, but specifically when they were not. Every difficult morning, when he chose to act from his values instead of from his fears, every interaction where he responded from his character instead of his emotion, every moment of pressure where he held his own ground, rather than abandoning it for the relief of someone else's approval. All of it was brick by brick construction of the specific inner architecture that made him, in the truest sense, untouchable. Not immune to pain, not closed to love, immune to diminishment, closed to the specific, quiet, corrosive influence of other people's assessments of his worth. That is what you built. That is what she could not calculate for. That is what she discovered when she tested the assumption and found that what she thought was need was actually choice, and that the choice, when the conditions no longer warranted it, could simply be made differently. Comment below, untouchable, if you've built something inside yourself that nobody's opinion can get to. Let's address the specific moment when she realized the need assumption was wrong, because this moment is worth examining honestly rather than through the filter of either satisfaction or forced indifference. The moment of her realization is not usually dramatic. It is not usually a single conversation or a single event. It is the specific, accumulating recognition that the availability she had been taking for granted was not, in fact, guaranteed, that the man she thought she understood had a flaw, that beneath the consistency and the investment and the generosity, there was not the desperate need she had inferred, but a genuine, self-possessed, freely choosing person whose choices could be made differently if the conditions warranted it. That recognition, quiet, involuntary, delivered by the accumulated evidence of your absence, rather than by any single dramatic moment, is the specific correction of the need assumption by reality. What she does with that recognition is, as always, entirely her own business and entirely outside your control. Some women reach out. Some sit with the recognition quietly. Some use it to examine their own patterns. some do not. The Stoic does not organize their behavior around producing a specific response to the recognition or maximizing the discomfort it creates. What the Stoic does is simply continue building, continue investing in his own life, continue the daily practice of becoming the man he has decided to be. Because the recognition, however it lands, is not the point. The man who produced it, through the genuine work of building genuine self-sufficiency, is the point. And that man continues regardless of what the recognition produces. He was not building toward her realization, he was building toward himself. The realization is a side effect. The building is the substance. Comment below, her realization was a side effect, if the work was always about you, not about what she eventually figured out. Here is the honest conversation about what genuine untouchability looks like in a new connection. Because the goal of all this work is not to become someone who never connects again, never invests again, never opens fully again. The goal is to connect differently, to invest from a different internal place, to open fully from the foundation of genuine self-sufficiency, rather than from the anxious hope that the connection will fill something that your own inner life has not yet filled. The untouchable man does not love less, he loves more honestly. He is more genuinely present because he is not monitoring the interaction for signals about his own worth. He is more genuinely warm because the warmth is not a strategy to produce a particular response. It is simply the natural expression of a person who is full enough to give freely. He is more genuinely interesting because he is actually absorbed in his own life and his own becoming rather than performing absorption for the benefit of whoever is watching. Seneca wrote that the man who has genuinely done the work of building himself, who has arrived at the specific, earned, internally verified sense of his own worth, brings something to his relationships that the man who has not done that work cannot offer. The genuine gift of a presence that is freely given rather than desperately extended. You cannot be truly loved for need. You can be needed. You can be useful. You can be the specific temporary relief of someone else's loneliness or insecurity. But love, genuine, chosen, freely given love, requires a person who is present by choice. And the person who is present by choice is only possible when the person has an actual, genuine, freely livable alternative to being present. That alternative, the full, rich, self-sufficient inner life that makes genuine choice possible, is what the untouchable man has built. And what he brings to connection from that foundation is categorically different from what he was bringing before. Comment below, I love from strength now, if the work changed not just how you are seen, but how you show up. The final thing. The understanding that pulls every thread of this video into the single most important truth it has been building toward. She thought you needed her. She was wrong. But the more important truth is not that she was wrong. It is why she was wrong. She was wrong not because you performed independence convincingly enough to fool her, not because you deployed the right tactics at the right moments to create the impression of self-sufficiency. She was wrong because you did the actual work, because somewhere in the period between when the assumption was made and when it was tested, you built something real. Not for her, not to prove her wrong, not to produce the specific realization that her assumption was an error. For yourself, because your life is happening right now, and the quality of how you inhabit it is the only measure of it that is genuinely and permanently yours. The man who does that work, who builds the genuine inner citadel, who cultivates the real self-sufficiency, who develops the actual rich inner life that makes love a choice rather than a need, is not just untouchable in the sense that people cannot diminish him. He is untouchable in the more profound sense that his worth is no longer subject to the fluctuations of anyone else's assessment of it. Not because he is defended against those assessments, because he has built something inside himself that their assessments simply cannot reach. Not armor. Foundation. And foundations, unlike armor, do not need to be maintained. They simply hold, every single day, under every kind of pressure, for the rest of a life that is being genuinely, fully, unapologetically lived. Like and subscribe to Stoic Blessing. Stay grounded, stay whole, stay unbreakable.